Hi everyone. In this video, I am going to explain this overpaint. This is an overpaint based on a piece submitted by a patron. This is the original. And at the end of this video, you are going to find a time lapse. But in this segment, I am just going to explain the changes I made. Okay, let's start with the skull. The height of the skull was a bit too tall, and to measure that, you should try to find your high point, which is the crown, is more or less at this point, and the bottom of the chin. Between those 2 points, around half the distance between those 2 points, you should place your eye line. Okay, if you notice the eye line is not the half point, it's more like a 60% from the top to the bottom. And if we go back to the overpaint, you're going to find that that ratio of 50% from the top is fulfilled more closely here. Okay, you can see that from the crown, the top of the skull to the eye line is more like 50, and from the eye line to the bottom of the chin is also 50. Okay, obviously this is anime. The style is or like the genre is characterized by big eyes. Okay, so you have some leeway, but try to not go too far from that measure, because I had find that even in anime, if you go a bit too far, uh, things are going to turn a bit weird. Okay, so yeah, try to fulfill that ratio with the eyeline, and that's one point. The other thing I addressed was with the mouth. The mouth is a bit like uh, putting a muscle, and obviously we have a bit of a muscle. It's not too pronounced, obviously, but you want your mouth to feel like it is behind your nose. Okay, if I were to draw a line between the tip of the nose and the mouth, this is not something you want to have. That kind of line, that slant that goes outwards, is it depends of the point of view, but more often or not, it's going to be an issue. What you want, and let's go back to the overpay, is to have this kind of slant, the opposite. Okay, you here you can feel that the thing that is protruding the most is the tip of the nose. Okay, and the mouth, even the most protruding point of the lips, is not going to be more forward than the tip of the nose. Okay, so yeah, that's something I was bothered by the original, and this is not anything to do with style. You could have implemented the change just using that line, that kind of animal lip. I am not saying you should do it in the way I did it, but you should at least change the position of the mouth in 2D space to procure that sense of form. Okay, I hope that's clear, because sometimes I have people saying that oh, you are telling people to draw a certain way. No, I draw a certain way. Okay, it's just impossible for me to draw and don't have certain peculiarities to my style. I am just saying that the changes should be implemented. How do you implement it? That's up to you. Okay. If you want to preserve your style, use the same line, very fine lip like this one. That's okay. That's not a problem. But you should try to move that mouth so the sense of form is protected in a way that the as I said, the tip of the nose is the most forward point of the face. Okay. Let me see what else. Sorry, I I digress a bit there, but let's move. Contrast is very important, because contrast is what makes form turn. Okay. you're going to notice that in the overpay, there is a terminator line that goes like this. And that terminator line is important because I am catching the skull, I am catching the face, and I am reducing, I am trying to group those forms as a single one. And the characterization of that resulting form is more spherical than anything else. And how do you signal that spherical nature with that kind of shading? Okay. Um, in the original, the problem is that the contrast is too low. I see some highlights. Okay, you might tell me that this is another highlight that the light is catching at the top, and I see it. However, I will argue that sorry, your contrast should be higher to make that spherical form turn in space. Okay, that's what I wanted to do here in the overpay, and I will argue that the spherical nature is is conveyed more effectively here than in the original. Okay. Okay, let's move to something else. Let me check. Let's move to the eyes. Okay, it's a detail. However, it is an important detail. And let me control that eyelash a bit in the overpay because I was noticing that the eyeball was a bit too tall there. Okay, there are many points here. One of them is the value you use for the eyes. This is not bad because the value of the eyes is very close to the one of the flesh. However, the sclera, the white of the eye, is desaturated a lot. So you can take the value of the flesh, like here in the original, but please try to desaturate it a little bit. You don't have to make it 100% gray, but you should see a difference in saturation between the flesh and the eyeball. Okay, the white of the eye. Okay, let's move to the shadow drop of the eyelashes. I will argue that in any lighting situation, the drop shadow of the eyelash is always present. Okay, that's going to be very important because drop shadows, as you might remember in past videos, is what gives weight, is what gives presence to the forms that cast those shadows. Okay, so in the original, there is no shadow. It is a work in progress, as you can see. Maybe my patron wanted, he didn't tell me, but he saw this review before, and he didn't tell me if he planned to implement that drop shadow. But just in case, I will always try to draw that drop shadow. Um, okay, let's move to the highlights. Uh, for me, the iris and the pupil are like a plate. What I mean by that, let's draw this here. You have the bottom of your plate, you have the rest of your plate, and here you might remember how plates look. Okay, it's like a concave disc. You can imagine that is facing this side is facing the light. So that means that in the eyeball, because this is behind the eyeball, you're going to have a point in that sphere in the eyeball that is going to catch the first ray of light. Okay, that's your main highlight. That's going to be the sharpest highlight in your eyes, and I will arc in the whole face. This might vary in other lining schemes, but usually, more often than not, this is your main highlight. And that means that your secondary highlight is going to be this area here. Since this is your secondary highlight, this is not going to be as sharp as this main one, okay? You can make it sharper by contrast, by the way. You can put some darker value here. You can make it more wet and then sharper, as you can see here in the overpay. That's what I did. I purposely made everything else more blurry, so the main highlight could be more remarked. Okay, so I hope that's clear, because the problem in the original is that I had too many highlights. The one at the top bothered me the most. Uh, I don't see any object, anything else that contributes to that purple highlight there. So that's why I made things simpler. Okay. Usually, it's better to go, most of the time, almost always, it's going to be better to go from basic to complex. Okay. So I will say that with those two highlights is going to be enough. However, I know it's anime, so I added a weak tertiary highlight in the far side, and that might be reasoned by the environmental light. I mean everything else, the gray of the environment. Okay, let's move to something else. This is not about fundamentals. This is about the resolution you use for your canvas. This canvas was 800 by 600. That was way too small. And the problem is that when you have such a small resolution, and most of the drawing painting programs are going to use bicubic algorithm to do the transformations. You're going to implement those transformations, and yeah, everything's going to turn very blurry very fast. Okay, so you don't have too much leeway to do transformations. I suggest that you should not go below 2K in resolution, 2000 by 2000. I know, well, sometimes you might have some weak hardware, perhaps, but I will argue that at this point, even cheap hardware, cheap computer, cheap tablets, can handle very high resolutions. I remember because I still have my first gen iPad Pro from 2016, and that one can still handle 4K. As long as you don't go too crazy with the number of layers, you can go and do a very high resolution. Okay, let's see things in a more specific sense. Yeah, 619 by 825 pixels is too low, way too low. So yeah, bump up that resolution. I didn't bump up because I started to notice a bit late in the process, and yeah, it's just something for to keep in mind. If you do your drawings at low resolutions, try to consider going as high as your hardware allows it. Okay. Okay, let's move to something else. And okay, this thing is more about the contrast of colors. I saw the buttons, I saw the jacket, the skirt, the rest of the clothing, and it seemed a bit too monotonous, in the sense that it's almost monochrome. It's not bad. I like the pink accent, because the monochrome palette is going to allow that the pink is going to be like an accent color. But I will argue that you don't lose too much of that accent punch by introducing something like these golden colors at the bottoms, and that's going to give you a nice contrast, a nice accent, especially in this kind of scenario. As I said, I like the monochrome, but you should consider introducing a little bit more accents to that scenario. Okay. Um, Proportion wise, the hands in the original were too small. Just like the thing I said about the skull, you can find a reference in the way that the whole hand, when it's flexed, when you open your hand, that height should be the same as the height of the face. Okay, and I know it's anime again. You can go get away with a bit smaller hands. That's not bad. But these proportions, I will I will say they are way too small. They are definitely too small. Okay. Even in my overpaint, I am just noticing that the one that's closer to us, her left hand, is a bit small still. That's more like it, unfortunately, because the transformation at low resolutions makes that a bit blurry. But I hope you get my idea. Speaking of accents, let me check. Let me try something. Want to see how this looks? Eh, it's not. It's not bad. I will suggest picking the colors you already have to see what kind of combination you can find, what small accidents you find, and you should try to experiment. But I will say that by using the same color in different areas, you are creating echoes of that color. You are making your piece more cohesive that way. Okay. This is because I duplicated the original canvas, but this is not something I do. I just usually go from monochrome to accents and use those accents to color the rest of the piece. Okay, I know it's the process of each one will differ, but to me the palette is a bit too limiting, and I will suggest you try to experiment. Just introduce very few colors, very few accents, and try to do as much as possible with those accents. This is something that is certainly reflected in the original with the eyes and the hair. And yeah, it's something that should be pushed as much as possible. Okay. Speaking of pushing that pink color, I was considering that, well, this is a work in progress, but you can take that pink color and do an skin similar to the one in the eyes. Okay. Mm, something like this, perhaps, with a rim light here. And maybe let's take that color and use it to build up that secondary highlight. And right now, I am just trying to use that main highlight and use it to give form to that spherical shape of the jewel. Because highlights is not just an accent; it's something that you use to describe axes, to describe corners. And I'm going to go back to that concept very soon. Okay. So yeah, that's something to consider if you want to, if you don't find creepy that the jewel is the same lining scheme as the eye. Okay, I was telling you that highlights can be used to describe form, like here, for example. In the original, let's merge that. In the original, there is a lining scheme that works. I can see that this is the front side and this is the lateral side, and that's okay. However, here I try to introduce a different material like latex, a leather that's very reflective, and that reflectivity is going to be conveyed by the contrast of the highlight against the same value at the sides. That's going to come off as a corner. It's describing the corner of the body, and it's a way to get away with the same value at both sides, because the highlight is describing that separation between those two planes, between the frontal plane and the lateral plane. Okay, so you are using economy of value to a point, and you are also introducing another material. Okay, because uh, the change in contrast is the change in materials. Usually, for example, here you can see that this is very metallic because the contrast between the values used here, that gray, that white, pure white, and that gray is higher than anything else you see here in the shadow side of the clothing. Same goes in the skin, okay? And that's how you describe, that's how you convey different materials, okay? And let's see what else. I have some notes too. Okay, the implied detail thing. This is something I don't know if my Patreon was going to implement later, but better safe than sorry. I started to describe some of it. Tried to introduce some shadow shapes. Don't just leave your details to your texture brushes, your grids, and start to sculpt form through shadow shapes. Okay. Another thing I introduced was the occlusion shadows. When two or more objects are close to each other, the light cannot escape that small space, and that's going to create that occlusion shadow. Okay, you can see it all around the overlay. Here, for example, you can see that there is a drop shadow that is fusing with that form shadow, and everything else is combined here in this corner in that occlusion shadow. Okay, that's another very important concept. Try to group your shadows. To try to take different shadow shapes and see if they can be fused together. Like here, for example, at the bottom of the sleeve, I am fusing together those shadows, and the ones that are facing the line are going to be more separated. Okay, but that grouping of shadow is very important to make things more cohesive when you are rendering. And let's see. I think everything is addressed. I addressed more than the notes. But yeah, that's the purpose of these videos, to explain myself a bit further. Okay. So yeah, I hope this video was useful to you. If you want to receive this kind of reviews, I have a critic tier on my Patreon at patreon.com/Fires. And there you are also going to find some other reviews like this one that are of non-safe for works uh, that I cannot post in social media. So um, you can consider it just for those reviews or their critiques, or both. Okay. So yeah, I hope this was useful, and I hope to see you later. Bye.